Jason Goldberg is the founder and CEO of Fab.com, a deal site for design lovers. Welcome to Foundation New York. So let's start off at the very beginning. Where'd you grow up?
Sure, Rockville, Maryland, outside of DC.
Cool. And studied computers out there? Or?
No, I was a political science major at Emory in Atlanta. I've always had kind of startup blood in me, I feel like. The first startup I worked for was Bill Clinton's campaign in 1991, and dropped out of college to work for his campaign. Just was one of the first 30 people who kind of raised their hand and said, I want to do this. And went up to New Hampshire, volunteered for a couple of weeks, went out on the road and helped set up bus tours for him, got a job 3 weeks into it.
That's awesome. So you're actually working for the campaign itself.
Yeah, and so, it's like I went up I called them one day and they said, if you can get up here, we'll put you to work. And I just did it, and then they offered me a job a couple weeks later, and ended up traveling around the country with him in '92. I was 19 years old, and so our equivalent of like the tech IPO was instead of everyone making money, we won the White House.
Right.
And so I got to go to work for 6 years, and so I spent basically 93 through 98 working in the White House.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what were you doing up at the White House?
So I started off in an office called Cabinet Relations, and it was just kind of an office that coordinated what the cabinet was doing, and then I kind of found a niche for myself in economics, and so I worked for a guy named Gene Sperling, the National Economic Council, who's actually Obama's National Economic Council director now. And then when a guy named Erskine Bowles became chief of staff of the White House, I was one of his top aides, and did that from 96, 98. And left the White House in 98 to go to business school at Stanford. And when I left the White House, I was like 180 pounds, hadn't slept in years, 100-hour weeks, and it was the height of the dot-com boom, and said, Stanford had pretty weather and it was close technology, and let's go out and do that.
So had you heard about like everything? Obviously, you heard about the tech.com boom, and you're like, I got to get out there. Did you want to participate, or did you want to just go to school and see what was going on?
It was both. I mean, I went out to school knowing I wanted to get involved in startups, wanted to get involved in tech, and coming from government, I had kind of helped with some kind of internet initiatives in the Clinton White House, but I really wanted to kind of immerse myself in it. And so I saw Stanford as a great way to kind of have both the education as well. I mean, I'd never even seen a balance sheet or an income statement or something, so I didn't know the first thing about business.
Right.
As well as get involved in what was going on with startups, and worked for a bunch of startups during business school. Actually dropped out for a year to work for a startup that didn't make it, but it was a great learning experience. And then after business school, went to work at AOL Time Warner right after the merger here in New York, and then down in Dulles.
So you moved back out.
Yeah, so I came back.
Went out to New York.
Back to New York. So I was in DC, Atlanta, DC, Stanford, New York.
When you came back from Stanford, New York, what year was this? Was this post.com?
Yeah, it's 2000. So 2000.
So everything was blown up,
exactly.
And you're like, I'm out of here.
And so actually at the time, it was like 2001 felt like a good time to be at a place like AOL Time Warner. And what was interesting is I had done some work for AOL while I was at business school, kind of like consulting work, and I quickly learned that the guys at Time Warner hired me into the strategy group because I was the only one there who knew something about AOL, and Time Warner was trying to figure out what to do with it all.
Right.
And then I, shortly after 9/11, went down to Dulles, worked on AOL broadband, and then kind of the luckiest thing in my career at the time was I was recruited by T-Mobile USA to help launch T-Mobile Hotspot. So I went out to Seattle, where T-Mobile's headquartered.
So were you doing finance? What were we doing at this time?
Basically product management, business development.
Okay.
I think
Swiss Army knife, a little bit of everything.
I think called it market development, but I definitely had like I knew that my passion was around product, and I kept gravitating towards kind of how to get more involved in designing products, but didn't have any formal training in kind of product design. And T-Mobile thing was just real kind of fortunate. They did a search for they were looking for someone who had kind of business background, product sense, and who had worked in kind of broadband. And I remember sitting down with Robert Dotson, the CEO of T-Mobile, and he said, everyone in this entire campus, all they know is cell phones. We need someone who knows laptops and broadband.
Right.
And I said, all right, I'm in. And so I went out to T-Mobile and helped them launch T-Mobile Hotspot.
Which is huge.
Which was, and at the time though, it was just, they had signed a deal with Starbucks and American Airlines clubs. They had bought a company who had the technology, and it was like, we need to launch this thing.
So how many markets were you in at that point?
So we helped them put together a team. We put together a product offering, kind of a desktop client and stuff. And this is before people had to kind of real Wi-Fi built into the computer.
Right.
And but we launched 5,000 locations in the first 6 months that I was there, and it just took off. And
that's when people were using Wi-Fi cards that they would like slide into the computer. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and
it's funny how you forget that even existed.
And so from that, I gotta give you a whole resume here. But from that, I got to do, like they said, what do you want to work on here? And I said, well, I'd love to, Blackberries were just starting to take off. And so I said, I'd love to work on, there was like this BlackBerry T was like the first kind of small form factor. And I had the opportunity to work on kind of the user experience of that, what the apps would be on the device when you first get it. And
and then I design stuff at this point? I mean,
it was like product management.
Okay, so product management. So you have a team of designers underneath you.
Yeah. And then I just got the bug to start my own company, and it was 2003. And really, what hit me was, the kind of explosion of Friendster. I saw kind of the power of social networks, and I saw that I was hiring a lot of people at T-Mobile, and saw that the people I was hiring were all through relationships, through referrals, and someone who knew someone who knew someone. And I said, there's got to be a business idea here, and so I started a company called Jobster, which it's basically social networking for recruitment, and it was, I like to call Jobster, was a good idea before its time. It was before LinkedIn, before Facebook, and the idea was how create a service and enable people to get hired through networks. The Jobster story, so I did that 2004, 2007, was a great kind of good ride in education as a first-time entrepreneur. Made every mistake in the books. Raised $48 million of capital. Ended up
how much?
$48 million.
Decent chunk.
Yeah. Ended up basically got educated on that $48 million on how to start companies, and we ended up selling Jobster into two different pieces that no one made their money back, but for me it was a great education. One of the biggest things I learned was the importance of the product. Everything's about the product. And the thing that I look back on my Jobster days that I said I would never repeat again was, on day 2 of Jobster, I was no longer the product manager. I was this kind of general manager CEO. And it just killed me ever since then that I wasn't able to kind of actually manage what was actually going to be our product, our user experience. And the focus was on building the team, building sales and all this stuff. And
you just pulled too thin, like you were just spread out too much?
And also it felt like the role of the CEO was to just be broader than that, right? And I kind of tried to assume that kind of role. And that's something I said I would never do that again. That product is my passion. The user experiences, I think, especially in a web-based business or an app-based business, it's all about what is the product that people are interfacing with. And I really became this kind of this thing where I feel like the CEO needs to own the product and has to have their kind of their personal touch on the product, much like say the myth of Steve Jobs does. Anyway, so made lots of mistakes at Jobster, but also learned a lot.
Yeah, talk to me about raising $48 million in capital. Like, what was it like when you were first going out for funding? So this was the first time you'd ever raised any money before. How did you figure out where to go?
So it was really interesting. So in 2003, no one was investing in consumer internet companies, and I had this idea in my head, and just kept started talking to folks, and started talking to folks that I went to business school with who are now working in VCs in the Valley. And there was actually a firm in Seattle, Ignition Partners, who I don't even remember how they heard that I was working on this, but they heard about the idea and they said, we will do everything we can to get you to not take this to the Valley. Right? We want you to build this in Seattle. We're all about building Seattle companies. And they believed in me, and they basically what they did is the first thing they did was they gave me, it was kind of equivalent to what you might say now is like kind of seed money, but basically they gave me an offer to quit my job the next day and kind of incubate Jobster out of their offices, kind of like an EIR type thing. And I literally quit my job the next day and said, sure, why not? But also I was very naive at the time. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about how to bring founding teams together. So they basically brought my founders to me. They were all a bunch of Microsoft guys, and married me with these Microsoft developers and said, let's go build this product. And
so you didn't have much say in who these people were?
No, it was like, meet this guy.
Right.
Could you all get along? All right, fine. And
right.
and I was kind of like, this kind of, I'd say, naive nervousness about building a first company. And
it's like the same thing I went through.
Yeah, and it was like, all right, so let's do it.
Right. You just trust these people. You're like, this probably work out.
And they're all good people. It's just there's the little things you gotta get right from the beginning that we didn't. But one of the lessons learned was obviously pick your founders really carefully, and make sure that you really know what you're doing before you hire. I really feel like you need to have a good kind of conceptual sense of what you want to do, or at least an understanding amongst your team of how you're going to figure that out together. Whereas we were just kind of like, all right, I had an idea, social network and recruitment. Put 10 guys in a room and let's see what happens.
Right.
And I didn't know at that time really how to lead that. And but the other thing, one of the lessons that we learned right from that, or I learned from that was, we hired a development team. It was like 12 guys out of Microsoft, and we basically built product the Microsoft way back in 2004, which we spent a year building the first version of the product, and then shipped it to our customers. And ahead of shipping it, we signed like an ungodly number of customers in like a conceptual phase. It was like 1,000 customers signed up, like enterprise companies, to use our product before we even launched. And invariably, you spend a year to build something. You then spend 6 months getting customer feedback and getting, the cycle was just too long.
Right.
And meanwhile, during that year that we were building, LinkedIn took off.
Right.
Or started. At the same time, Facebook was being incubated and all that sort of stuff. And it was just the way of building it was just
too
wrong.
slow.
Yeah, and we also got way too caught up in sales. And one thing I learned was, obviously, you need sales to have revenue, but have a great product first. And so we sold 1,000 companies on something that we just couldn't deliver on. That the product we ended up giving them wasn't as good as the promise we had sold them. And then we were constantly trying to play catch up to that.
Right.
Two other kind of lessons from the Jobster days. One, actually, I got dozens of them, but one of them was it was in 2007. I had 3 guys worked with me on a product for about a month at Jobster that I personally product managed, and we built this product in a month. And it was better than anything we'd built in kind of the previous 3 years. It really taught me about speed and agility and small teams and just kind of pushing through kind of a product you want to get done.
How do you feel that you get these people in that mindset though? Because it seems to me that there's people that have worked at very enterprisey, government jobs, whatever it may be. And I worked in the government for a little bit as well. And I know
Sorry about that.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Like, it just getting anything done, it just takes forever. And so, how do you take someone that would potentially come from that environment and convince them, like, hey, we need to be agile. We need to be putting out, a release, every couple days. Like,
yeah, I think it's not easy to give people that mentality, but you get there by repetition and kind of proving it and showing it. So I'll give you, so fast forward a little bit in my career. So after Jobster, I basically did what I call the anti-Jobster. Is instead of starting a company with lots of venture capital and a huge team, at one point we had 150 people at Jobster, I basically just got back to basics. It was me and 3 developers built a product. It's called Social Medium. And all we did every day was say, all right, we're going to ship code 3 times a week. And the first version of the product that we did, we built in 3 weeks. We put it out there, got user feedback, and just kept iterating.
That's such a great feeling, isn't
it? It was amazing, right? And we built up this really huge, loyal. Huge for us with loyal user base very quickly, very rapidly. The company was acquired after 11 months. It was nice win for everyone involved. There was no VCs to worry about. It was just 11 months from ship date to acquisition, done. And one of the things was the guys that we were working with, so it was the team that I work with now, a technology team, we started on social media. And we started actually before social media, and I gave them a project to do at Jobster. There were these 3 guys in Pune, India, who had basically built one of the first really interesting Facebook apps. It was called the Interactive Friends Graph. And I saw it took off virally, several million users, back in kind of mid 2007 when the Facebook platform first took off. And I reached out to these guys and said, "Who are you? Right? What is this?" And they said, "We're actually just 3 guys who just experimented with this thing. Our day job is running my brother's online jewelry store, and we just did this for fun. And we're actually going to take it down because we can't support it." And I said, "All right, well, let's start doing some work together."
Right.
And so we started social media together. Basically, when I left Jobster, we said, well, let's start this company together. I went over to India and spent 2 weeks with them, came back 2 weeks later, spent another week with them. And one of the first kind of challenges that we had was, as we hired that team up from 3 people to 12 people, was how to get...
12 people all based in India?
All based in India. And so social media and the whole team was me in New York and the first 3 guys in Pune, and then we became 12 in Pune by the time that we sold the company. But the biggest challenge we had was kind of a cultural challenge, which kind of goes back to your question, which was the developers in India, for the most part, had always worked on kind of someone handing them a spec, someone telling them here's the requirements.
Right.
Someone
not much creative control there.
Not at all.
Okay.
Right. And what Nishith, my kind of co-founder of social media, and what he and I had to basically foster was how do you convince people and tell people to make mistakes, all right? And so we literally would put like signs up on the wall that say make mistakes. We would push them to actually, we're going to ship this no matter what, and they're like, no, it's not that. And we just it's shipping, right? And so we had this mantra was ship it. That every week we are going to ship a major milestone. Every other day, we're going to ship iterative, kind of enhancements, and it doesn't matter if it's fully baked or not. We're going to put it out there, and we're going to get used. And it was a phenomenal experience because we basically took people who had never worked that way, and just by doing it again and again and again, they were able to start to kind of feel the rhythm of that.
Right, and the excitement that goes along with that too.
Absolutely.
I think it plays a lot into your company's kind of overall morale and just
yeah. So then I'll tell you. So the next step of that story is social media was acquired by Xing, which is like
Xing.
Like LinkedIn of Europe, a public company.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
So basically, it's the professional social network in Europe. And basically, social media was before people got kind of news through their social networks. So before people were discovering news through their Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds, our concept basically was get the news through people you know. And so we looked at your contacts, whether it was on Twitter was just starting then, but on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, email, and help you figure out what are they reading each day. So it's kind of like a simpler, more social version of Dig, so to speak, right? Much more around the network than around the mass, right? And so of all the people that I email every day, what are they reading?
Right.
You can say much like Google Plus is today.
That's cool.
Like a precursor to that. It was us and FriendFeed basically started a similar concept at the same time. They went a little broader than we did. Ours was very focused on news, and we rode the election cycle in 2008, which we had a nice rise on. But when Xing acquired the company, Xing's a German company, and Ship It was the farthest thing from mind. All right, and so kind of the notion of doing kind of shipping things that are half baked was like so foreign to German culture. Everything has to be very process oriented, and even like web time in Germany is like. You might ship code once a month or once every 2 months.
Right.
And I was brought in to be the chief product officer there, and Lars Hinrichs, the founder of Xing, to his credit, was leaving the company and said, I need someone to come in here and help these guys ship code.
So did you move out to Germany?
I did. I spent 2009 in Germany.
You've been all over the place.
Yeah, and what was cool though is we had this ship it mantra inside of Xing, when we forced people to put stuff out there, and it really worked. I mean, it helped them really accelerate kind of the product there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So fast forward to today. I mean, how did you come up with Fab, and how did you?
So I left Xing after spending a year there after the acquisition, and then came here back to New York to start Fabulous. And Fabulous was basically social networking for gay men. It was an idea that I had that saw, gay people over-index on discretionary spending, like to travel, that very active in social networks and blogs, and there really wasn't any kind of review social service for gay people to discover kind of where to go, what to do, et cetera. I joined with Bradford Shellhammer, who's my co-founder still at Fab today, and we always said that I was the gay, I was the geek and he was the gay. We're both gay, but he was more kind of a professional gay and I was more the geek. And we kind of set out to kind of, put together kind of, it was like gay Yelp meets gay Foursquare, with kind of social features. And working with the same guys in India, we built that team. Basically, we did Xing together, we left Xing together, took that team from 12 up to 20 people for Fabulous. A lot of the angel investors who invested in social media and came back into Fabulous. And
at the time, did you have Fab.com or?
We did not.
Okay.
So this was January 2010. We started Fabulous, and we did the same kind of ship it model. We just did real iterative, fast kind of development. And Fabulous. So we did that all throughout 2010. We built up a pretty decent kind of base of kind of loyal users. So we had about 150,000 users, of which about 30,000 were coming back every day. But at the end of last year, a couple things kind of converged. One is we started doing kind of daily deals on the site, and we really got energized by selling stuff. And a couple of things we noticed was, one, that Bradford was a really good kind of curator of product. And coming from a design background, Bradford used to work for Design Within Reach, Blue Dot, and Dwell. People really just love what Bradford was picking, right, from a product standpoint. And we found that a lot of people were buying our daily deals. First of all, the deals themselves weren't necessarily had anything to do with being gay, and the people who were buying them weren't necessarily gay either. We had like over 50% of people in a lot of deals were clearly women, kind of just straight people. People just wanted a good deal.
Right.
And we looked, and we also saw, we raised some money from first round capital in November of last year, and we sat down with the first round capital team and said, look, we know we can build really good product. And we had lots of accolades for the user experience of Fabulous, and we built some features that were kind of steps ahead of Foursquare and Yelp in terms of functionality and experience. And it just killed me that no one was using it. Right? And I just couldn't do the math to figure out how it would become a big business. And Bradford and I got together and said, all right, what do we want to do here? Right? Because I had a couple companies that asked me, will you come be the CEO of this company? And I wanted to, I don't want to work for anyone else. Just want to be do startups. I didn't really see how Fabulous was going to become as big as we wanted to be, and said, all right, so let's just, put everything on pause for a minute and say, if we could do anything, what would we do? And that's where the idea behind Fab.com came. And basically, Bradford and I put our heads together and said, if we were to basically take my passion and Bradford's passion and turn it into a business, what would it be? And we basically
and it also feels like you were taking the most successful component out of what you had already created, or one
exactly.
And then rolling that.
I would say I called it a pivot, but in reality we started over.
Whole new business.
The company is still, we basically changed the name. So one thing, I went out personally and bought the domain name fab.com. And I would have done that whether we were doing the gay business or the new business.
Right.
I basically, Fabulous.
That had to be an expensive ass domain.
You'd be shocked at how it wasn't as expensive as you might imagine. Yeah. I would say it was six figures, but it was low six figures.
Okay.
And over the course of a couple of months, I negotiated with this guy who owned it. It was a domain hoarder, and I basically convinced him over the course of a couple of months that if he didn't sell it to me, no one was ever going to buy it. And then I bought it.
Did you do cash and equity, or just
all cash?
All cash.
I just wrote him a check.
Because I've seen that happen as well. Like these big six-figure domain names, people are like, I give a couple % of the company plus some.
I had some third-party domain appraisers value it well over $1 million. 3-letter domain name, brand value. If you can build a brand on that.
Yeah.
And
we just got through this. We're starting a new project called Oink, and we got Oink for $25K, I think, something like 27, something like that.
Yeah.
But it was a hard process. I mean, it's crazy the inflated price of domains right now.
But once I felt comfortable about the price, I didn't look back. Like I wrote a check and I told my board, we'll figure out later how the company buys this from me. I'm buying this domain name.
Right.
And Fabulous was spelled Fabulis, and it always just killed me to have all right, so explain to someone it's Fabulous spelled wrong.
Right.
And so we bought Fab.com, and we were starting to consider what should we be doing next, and it was kind of all right, so we got this awesome domain name, it's a huge asset. We've got a really talented development team. We've got Bradford, who's an amazing kind of design mind. My passion is in building customer user experiences. If we could do anything, what would we do? And that's basically what we came up with Fab.com was, we had a passion for design, whether it's design of product or design products themselves. If you look around our office now, it reflects kind of Bradford and I's kind of design aesthetic. And we said, well, what if we were to basically build a beautiful website, a beautiful user experience that's all about buying beautiful things that is affordable and approachable, and kind of make design available for everyone everywhere. And we did it. And it was, I'll tell you, it was the coolest experience I've had in my entire professional career. Was starting over. I did an analysis over like a week of different options for what to do with the business, and this is in basically end of January, February of this year. Went to board of directors and basically did an individual board call with each of our four board members over a weekend. Had a 20-minute board meeting on the Monday. Everyone said go, because basically what I said is, this is what we're passionate about. This is what I believe is going to be a big business. Here's where I think it's going to work. If you don't want to invest, I'll give your money back, and I'll fund it myself. And they all said, no, let's do it. Right?
Awesome. One question about that though, when you're thinking about that business for the first time, you know, I've always been kind of an outside admirer of design, and you know, you go into a store like DWR, Design Within Reach, and you look around and you're like, wow, that Herman Miller chair is, you know, $2,500 or whatever it may be. So it's not something that's typically approachable for the average consumer. Yet when I come to your site, you know, you get these deep discounts, things like that, and you make it very approachable. But like, how did you know that you were able to actually get those deals, that this was going to be a viable business? Like,
yeah, so I think, first of all, we looked at design as a lifestyle choice, and that design is, you know, there is good design product across every product category, across every price point. And I think, you know, we looked at things like, you know, Design Within Reach as, you know, that's a very kind of elitist, kind of high-end, kind of
top 5% brands, kind of like top tier.
And we said that's not what we want to be. And we said, you know, part of the challenge there is they have to support a retail business. They have to support a business where you keep inventory in a store, and in order to pay for the people and pay for the rent, you've got to have kind of these top-priced items. And we said, look, online, you know, especially in a model which we have now where we don't take inventory, you know, there's no bounds to what we could offer on our site, right? And what we looked at as kind of an inspiration for us was, you know, whether it's the way I say a Target has kind of branded itself as all about, you know, good design, or the way Apple has kind of ingrained in people's head that, you know, about good design and say technology products, or maybe going to the MoMA store or Alessi. But it was also just seeing design in kind of the simplest of objects, whether it's a great pencil or a notepad. I mean, you know,
I love those notepads, by the way, that you put on the site the other day. I ordered some of them. They're awesome.
And
field notes,
Yeah, field notes are amazing, right?
Yeah.
And they're
like $5.
They're relatively inexpensive, and you know, we did a little bit of homework. I'd say, frankly, not a lot, but we basically, you know, some of this was just like we said, we looked at, like, you know, say like Gilt and One Kings Lane, and we said, you know, what's happening here is kind of like the beginning of e-commerce 2.0 is what I saw, was that e-commerce 1.0 is Amazon, right? And that, you know, by now you can buy anything on Amazon, and, you know, you can search on Amazon and buy pretty much anything. The challenge,
there's no social there, though.
There's no social, and most people don't wake up in the morning going, hey, I'm going to browse Amazon today.
Right.
You go to Amazon for a purpose.
You've got an item in mind, and you might get drawn into something else based on some kind of funky recommendation engine they have.
Yeah, and what we saw with Guild, you know, kind of with the kind of flash sale model was, you know, it's bringing a daily kind of, it's almost like a daily candy. It's like bringing a daily dose of wow or surprise to people in their inbox of something that they maybe weren't thinking about. You know, they didn't wake up that day thinking I need to buy this.
There's a little hit of dopamine when you get excited to open that up. Yeah.
And so we said, well, gosh, you know, we love shopping this way. It's a beginning of what we saw as kind of a better browsing experience. Flash sales is just kind of a step along the way, we thought. What if we could do that to design? And do that in a way where it's making design approachable, affordable for everyone. You know, I'm not a design junkie. I have some design in my life. Bradford, I consider a design junkie. Like, if you walk in his apartment, everything looks like our office does here, right? But what I hit on was that, you know, for someone like myself, you know, everyone likes to have some good design in their life.
Absolutely.
And I started to, you know, build this kind of this belief that we started to say, let's test the hypothesis that if you put two things in front of someone and they're at the same similar price point, and one's well designed and one's not, will they, you know, in most cases, you know, kind of take the wow product or the product that, you know, that has like the cool design? And I think that's true. And, you know, and maybe, you know, some people have different aesthetic or taste. They might like more traditional or something like that. But good design can be anywhere across any number of different types of categories, products, price points, et cetera. And
so this has to be challenging for you then. You're working with a whole variety of different vendors. Like, how do you figure out, you know, who does the drop shipping? Do you ship the stuff yourself? Do you get a warehouse? Like, how did you figure out that piece of it?
Yeah, so the first thing we did was, when we were deciding to kind of start the business, was we reached out to basically suppliers in Bradford's network and said, first of all, you know, we studied what other folks were doing in this market and said, all right, we don't need to reinvent some of these things.
Like Gilt does direct shipping from Gilt, right?
Right, and so we looked at, so fashion is different than home products and kind of design objects in the sense that fashion is on like a quarterly season, and things kind of had like this path of kind of being on the rack, off the rack, to discounters, et cetera. And with fashion, you also have kind of, a lot of, you really need to figure out returns in a major way in fashion, because you have sizing issues and like this didn't fit or this didn't like it. And, whereas with more kind of like home products and design objects, most of the suppliers are already used to some sort of kind of drop ship model. And so we reached out to them and said, as a first step, how do you feel about working with us in mostly a drop ship environment? And uniformly, they all said, no problem, we can do that. That's how we're set to work. I'll tell you, so what we hit on though in our first conversations with potential suppliers was just that this was very different from fashion, in the sense that the fashion market and model for flash sale is very much liquidation. And everyone we talked to really said we need new sales channels. And I think what we saw is with the kind of the economic crisis, especially the fall of kind of the housing market, that all the retail kind of bricks and mortar channels for designers had really dried up. At the same time, we saw that there's a lot of kind of people who maybe they were laid off from a job, or the job doesn't exist anymore, just decided to start making stuff as a way to make a living. And they're saying, all right, now I'm making stuff, I need a way to sell it.
Right.
And a lot of the kind of emerging designers we talked to, and these are not just mom and pop shops, these are guys who can produce 500 or 1,000 of something. They're like, I've got my website, I tried selling some stuff on Etsy, but I need a
People aren't
platform.
coming there on a daily basis.
Exactly.
They don't have the platform. It's funny, my friend Joey Roth has been on your site.
Joey's fantastic.
Ceramic speakers and the
our
Sora
third
pod.
biggest sale to date.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome. So like, he's a great example of someone that has his own destination site, has a little bit of a following for people that enjoy his design aesthetic, and has his email list or whatever it may be, but doesn't have that outlet to like, boom, I want to unleash this and like put this out there and like get a bunch of sales.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do is, and I think one of the awesome things about the design kind of category is that when people get a fab.com email every day, first of all, it's well designed. But it's
beautiful,
and it's intended to be more of like an inspiration than just a sales pitch.
Yeah.
And so people say, wow, I didn't know that existed, or that's something cool. And we hear this back from our customers all the time, that they welcome it in their inbox versus the daily coupon.
It's very
that
true.
Getting.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why, like full disclosure, I'm an investor in your company, and one of the reasons I really wanted to do it is that I really enjoyed the experience of just browsing the site, even though I'm not going to buy anything.
Oh, you better buy something.
Well, I do buy stuff, but I'm just saying, like, if there's a day where there's nothing I'm going to buy, look, and I'm like, I'm not interested, I'll still look through and just be like, I wonder what this designer has, and it's just like, it gets me thinking about like, oh, I might want to change this in my room or do this differently, and it is inspiration. And I like you added a section of the site.
Inspiration wall.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, so when we decided in February of this year to kind of restart the company, we put together, I call it like a 5-point plan to making this successful. And we basically just done every single one of those 5 points. Basically, it was a plan that basically got us to July. And so yes, 2 days ago was July 31st. And the first thing was we said, let's build the most beautiful website possible for people to buy from us. And we said, if it's going to be selling design products, it's got to be well designed, and people got to love the experience. And what we tried to do there is really just get out of the way and really showcase the products. Very little text, very little functions, just kind of put the products, nice visuals, front and center.
Zooming's
really,
awesome.
Really clean. The second thing is we said we wanted to make sure we had 100 suppliers signed up before launch. And that's really a credit to Bradford and the buying team he put together. Brought together a bunch of people who worked at places like the Conran shop, from Design Within Reach, from Blue Dot, from Dwell, Apartment Therapy, and kind of brought this team together of people who are just really great in going and finding stuff. And especially some of the people we brought together who are really good at finding like the emerging kind of younger or kind of independent designer who really was desperate to kind of find a better way to sell.
You could put these people on the map then, in essence. Like,
I tell you, there's many suppliers who sold through Fab in our first 6 weeks who've sold more in 6 weeks than they'd sold in 6 months previously. I mean, I'm sorry, so more in a 3-day sale with us than they'd done in 6 weeks prior. The third thing we had was we knew we needed to have an audience, and this was the one the big unknown was like, so if you launch daily deals or daily sales and there's no one to get them, who cares?
Right.
And so we set an internal goal of getting to 100,000 subscribers before launch.
How do you get to 100,000 before launch?
So this was what I would say definitely was I'd say a couple things converged really well. One is We created social features before we launched the sales. We created an inspiration wall where people could upload photos, share design inspirations, comment on them, tweet about them. And that was, people really took to it. And then we also created a really good kind of viral loop where people could, when they sign up for the service where we launched, a lot of sites just have like this pre-launch signups like a couple weeks before. We did 3 months before. And then we gave people different incentives to invite 3 friends or 10 friends or 25 friends. If you got 50 friends to join, you got free shipping for the first 6 months. And we showed them the kind of products that would be on the site so they got a feel for it. And what amazing is we just discovered that people seemed to love the concept even before they even knew what it was. Like we told them we were launching a flash sale site for design. We showed them some of the types of products we were looking, and they would start sharing it everywhere.
Crazy.
Yeah, and so we're at a point today, we're actually even before launch, so our goal was 100,000 members at launch. We got to 170,000 before launch day, and of the 170,000, over 100,000 of them came from someone else's invite. And so someone who told someone who told someone who told someone.
That's awesome.
We juiced it a little bit with some targeted Facebook ads, but highly targeted to basically only people who had design interests or who had expressed interest or likes on different flash sale sites, and we also targeted some tech early adopters. But we created this, this buzz on Twitter, on Facebook, that's really served us well. So that was the third part of kind of the plan. The fourth was just really to launch the site and prove it every day with a great customer experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on everything you've done. It's been amazing to watch.
We're having fun, and it's cool when people like what you're doing, and we just try to keep up with it.
And right now it's still invite only. It's going to stay that way.
It'll always be invite only. It's done this way because the suppliers, we try to protect their kind of retail pricing. It's a 3-day sale only on our site.
Does my code still work? Can I tell the audience the code?
We will have to create a new code. So we should create fab.com/Kevin Rose.
Okay,
all
perfect.
One word.
Yep.
And anyone who joins with that code will get $10 instant credit.
Awesome. Sweet.
Cool.
Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Kevin.
the advice.
All right. Thanks.